Have you ever left the hospital after giving birth and thought, why do I feel so broken when everyone just says I should be grateful? I'm joined today by Brigid Tebaldi, a functional women's health coach and mom of five, for a conversation about the hidden side of birth trauma, the kind that doesn't always leave physical scars, and why your nervous system might be holding on to your pain that your mind can't explain. If your body feels tense, your emotions are all over the place, or you still can't shake the fear from your birth experience, this episode is for you. Still trusting a system that profits from your sickness? Faith Over Pharma is here to flip the script and help you heal the way God designed. If you've been feeling exhausted, anxious, or just off, even though your doctor says everything looks normal, it might be time to look a little deeper. In my Hormone and Healing Roadmap session, we'll go beyond symptoms and lab numbers to uncover what your body's really trying to tell you. Together, we'll connect the dots between stress, hormones, gut health, and your nervous system and create a personalized, faith-led plan to help your body find peace, balance, and energy again. This isn't another 5-minute doctor visit. It's a one-on-one holistic session where you'll finally get the answers that you've been looking for and leave with a clear, simple plan that supports healing from the inside out. You can book your session at susangladstein.com. If you've ever left the hospital after giving birth feeling like something inside of you broke, physically, emotionally, or spiritually, today's episode is for you. So many women walk away from birth feeling dismissed or disconnected from their bodies or carrying pain that they just can't quite name. Today's guest, Brigid, knows that story well. She's a functional women's health coach and mom of five who helps women heal from birth trauma, reconnect with how God designed their bodies, and find peace and joy again. I am so honored to have you here today. And I would love to start with your story. Like, what led you into this work, and how did your own birth experiences open your eyes to what so many women are silently walking through?
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. And my own experience is what propelled me into this work. And so, with my second baby, I had my first three in the hospital, and with my second baby, everything was fine. He was a precipitous labor. Everything was totally fine until about 5 or 6 hours after, when all of a sudden I started just bleeding everywhere, and the nurses and hospital staff couldn't figure out what was happening. They just came in, they couldn't figure it out. They kept saying her uterus is hard, so they ruled out a uterine hemorrhage, which is pretty common. Codes were called over the loudspeakers, and it was just like everybody rushed into the room, and it was really scary. And then I was taken into the OR, had surgery, all the things like that, and it was a rare form of hemorrhage that can happen. Again, it's super rare though. My OB, who had been practicing for like almost 50 years, had never seen it before. And so it was just kind of this crazy thing. But afterwards was when I was really struggling, because I felt like what happened, like I just couldn't reconcile what happened. And I was asking for help in ways that I thought were obvious, but apparently were not obvious, because nobody was reaching out and asking how they could support me or anything like that. And so I really internalized all of that and just made it like I'm the problem, something's wrong with me. But then also feeling scared to be even more direct and ask for help, because I didn't want my babies to be taken away from me. And it was never like anything where their safety was in danger or anything like that, but that was my perception of what would happen if I did ask for support. And so from there, it took me about 2.5 years until I finally was able to really heal and process everything that I went through. And whenever I did, it completely changed my life. It completely changed like who I am as a person, how I mother, how I show up in the world. And so I'm just really passionate about helping other women who've gone through similar experiences, whether it be around birth or even just more general trauma, especially from childhood, to really process and heal, because that trauma really keeps us stuck. And until you can release that and really start to understand your body's just protecting you and how you can work with your body. Until you can really understand that, it really is hard to move forward, no matter if you're doing all the things, reading all the books, listening to all the podcasts. It really is important that you have that body connection first so that your mind feels safe enough to process what happened.
And it's so interesting. So my first baby, now I was 22 years old and not very holistic minded. I wasn't certainly did not take very good care of myself. Like I didn't really at that time felt like I needed to. But my son was an emergency C-section because they kept losing his heart rate. And so they knocked me out, took him. I woke up, thought I had to be at work, and they were like, "Do you want to see your baby?" And I was like, "Oh, that's what I'm here for." Like I totally was so out of it and was not very present. And of course, when I had my daughter 4 years later, they just had me do a repeat C section. So no big deal. Repeat. I didn't know anything better, obviously. And then I got pregnant way later again in my 40s, more holistic minded at this point, but I I really sort of battled a lot of that like I'm holistic minded, but the doctors are telling me I need to have a C-section. And it was during COVID, so that was a whole other thing. And I can remember because of that experience and because I had gone down some rabbit holes and became more educated in things, but in a lot of ways felt bullied into some of my decisions. And it wasn't until this year in 2025 when I had my baby and was just very confident in my decisions. And I had gone through processing a lot of that sort of trauma and things that I didn't really realize, which is why I'm glad we're talking about it because I didn't realize how much of that, those other experiences that affected me. But even in the hospital, like trying to tell them what I felt was best for my baby just naturally and knowing what I know and how the body works. And I hadn't eaten because I had a fourth C section. I hadn't eaten in over 24 hours. And they were like, basically gave me 5 minutes to try to breastfeed a sleeping baby post C section and told me that I was getting all the nutrients that I needed from my IV. And they just wanted to whisk him off to the NICU and pump him full of glucose because his numbers were 2 points lower than they needed to be. And it was just one of those things where I was like, time out. Like, let's think about how the body works. But it was very much wrapped around hospital protocols. And there's a lot of fear. They were trying to tell us like all the things that were going to go wrong with the baby because I didn't listen to their protocols and what they were going to say. And I think that and that was kind of really why I created this podcast was I wanted to equip people with education and knowledge and confidence so that if they knew in their gut something was wrong or they wanted to do things a certain way, but the system, the protocols, the whatever was telling them otherwise, that they would have the ability to speak up, ask questions, and not be fearful. So, why do you think that so many women kind of accept the hospital system as normal, even though in a lot of cases the outcomes actually seem to be getting worse?
Yes. Thank you for sharing all of that too, by the way, your personal story. And so, just to speak really fast on the outcomes, unfortunately, they are pretty much getting worse. So, in 1970 or so, the C-section rate was, depending on who you look at, was approximately 10 to 15% or so. Versus today, most hospital C-section rates in the US are around 30 to 35%, which is a huge increase in just 40 years. Like, that's huge. But for whatever reason, that's not really talked about, right? And so, again, I only share that, and we share that C-section rate because it's such a definitive thing. Like, first, there's some other things that are a little harder to quantify and measure. because again, that's showing you how we're moving from this physiological natural birth into more of the medicalized birth. And I believe that the reason that this is likely happening is because again, the medical system that's is like everywhere in our life is set up in this way to really keep us coming back and keeping us small. And so we are, as a culture, we've been trained to believe that in order to give birth, it means that you're on your back in a hospital bed, sweating, people all around you, legs up in a stirrup, you're pushing, you're screaming, like it's awful, it's unbearable, and everybody's telling you like push, 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 when in reality it's like that is not at all what birth has to look like. But that's what we are told birth looks like. So from a young age, like I remember being little and seeing these videos of like well, sometimes online, um, movies of this is how birth is. Or I remember like this one Grey's Anatomy episode where it's like that's what birth looked like, and I'm like, that's what my mind went in thinking that birth had to look like. And so again, I believe that's really why things are going the way that they're going. Is again because moms just don't know what birth can look like, and also doctors and even um, different practitioners, they also don't know what birth can look like. So I remember whenever I was giving birth to my first, the OB, who again had like 40 or 50 years experience, he walked in like right before she was born and was like, "Why is she like making all these noises? Why is she like moving around?" And they're like, "She didn't have an epidural." And he's like, "What? Everybody has an epidural nowadays." And so he was like confused why I was up and moving around and making certain noises because I didn't have that epidural. So many OBs and even nurse midwives too come out of training not actually ever seeing a physiological birth. They also don't have the training anymore necessarily. I'm speaking generally because some of them do on breech birth. They don't have the training on twins. And so those skills are kind of being lost in some areas. And there's so many people doing good things to try to keep the skills around. But by and large, those skills are not learned anymore. And so they're being forgotten. And so therefore, we're moving more towards this medicalized birth because one, the skills aren't there. And then two, it's considered to be less risky and safer because it's controllable. When in reality, there's so many different things behind that. And so it's a big, huge issue. There's many different facets to it. Um, but again, generally speaking, women accept this because this is what we're told is normal. And if you go against the grain, then you're the weird one, or you're going to be paying thousands and thousands out of pocket, and all of these different things are at play.
And that's so true because in my baby in April this year, when we spoke out to not follow their hospital protocols, like we were labeled as those people, like we were, I don't know, everybody was talking about us. And we signed saying that we declined their recommendations, and I get the liability aspect of it. I understand that, but the way that it was sort of treated was just like, we didn't know what we were talking about, and we were going to kill our baby kind of thing. And that part is definitely, I felt strong enough in my convictions that I didn't care that they said that. But definitely in 2020 with my daughter, I felt so bullied by the decisions that I had made just based off of my experience and what I knew and all of the things. But also, even to that point, what I noticed is that so much of the system, the hospital system, it's like the timing thing. Like they want to hurry up, get you in, get you out, move along. And I'd actually taken a really, really great breastfeeding course beforehand, the Thompson method, which I cannot recommend enough, but it really helped me just kind of understand more about the body and how it all works naturally, and how, it's not pulling milk, out of your breast. It's really very much based off of hormones, and there was so much information. No, because I knew I was going into having a C-section, because in the state of Arizona, it's like after you've had three, nobody really wants to talk to you about doing anything other than that, which I think is, asinine. But anyway, I tried to minimize my risks and things as much as I could as far as that goes. But the education on just understanding how the body works was like made all the difference. But it was very much like, okay, if you don't feed by, 10:22, and it's like, no, like we're under opioids and we've had this experience, like that's not how the body works. You need to give me more than 5 minutes to try to feed. And it was just like crazy, but it was very much like moving cattle. They had to move, one into the next and move on to the next. And in that breastfeeding course, she was very adamant about like, this is your experience. Do not let them tell you or rush you. Like, no. And that helped me have the confidence to say, no, I don't need your help. Give me more time. But I know that we've talked a little bit about like birth trauma, and sometimes if we're holding on to that and we may not even realize it, what are some of the signs that someone who's listening might look for, and where does she start finding healing?
Yeah. So first off, I love that you mentioned that you might not even realize it because this was me for a long time. I didn't realize it. I just thought what I went through was normal because everybody was telling me, like, oh my goodness, like your baby's healthy, thank goodness. And like, I want to hear all the juicy details about what happened to you. Like, not how can I support you, anything like that. And so that's the thing that, again, a lot of people don't even realize it because we're just told, thank goodness your baby's healthy. Like, thank goodness you were in the hospital, that you had the support, like all the things. And these come from well intentioned people and like good hearts. But more often than not, that says more about their own insecurities than it does about like actually you. And so that's one of the first things. If anybody's listening and they've heard those things, just know again, it's less about you and more about how they're feeling right now. Now, some of the symptoms of this trauma they can range from going from like severe postpartum psychosis, but more often than not, what you'll see are things like fear of intimacy with your husband because you're afraid that if you have another baby, then you're going to have to go through this all over again. Um, Being so nervous, like every single time that you take one of those pregnancy tests, things like that. Snapping at your children, your other children, because you are so tired and like touched out, and like the everything is so loud because your nervous system is like stuck in this fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Um, Also, some of the other ones are going to be again like that you are triggered by little things about your kids. You can't drive past the hospital anymore because you have these feelings. Going into the OB or other even doctors makes your blood pressure spike. You have white coat syndrome, anything like that. There's some more severe ones like really being afraid of being touched, especially in like prenatal appointments, having anxiety around ultrasounds and things like that. But generally speaking, those are the big ones that I see. They can trickle into physical symptoms as well, because if your nervous system is trying to keep you safe, it's going to not prioritize the rest and digest. And so another big one is going to be like weight gain, thyroid issues, um, again, fertility issues, even because, again, if you don't feel safe, your body's not going to prioritize fertility. So it's a really wide range of symptoms. And there's no one definition of trauma. That's what I get asked a lot too, is like, how do you know if you've been through birth trauma? There's no definition. So it really is dependent upon the person, their own relative experience, and how they're feeling. So basically, if you have any sort of like negative feelings about your birth and it's affecting your daily life, like you're thinking about it, you have those flashbacks, then that means that you have some unprocessed trauma that it's really going to be important that you work through because it's going to keep showing up, not even just around birth and womanhood, but also in your day to day life as well.
That's I love all of that, because I times, yeah, we get into this, Oh, it's just part of mom life, I had a gal on my podcast that was talking about a lot of her, hormonal and postpartum issues came, and they all kinda dismissed all of that. Doctors, I mean, and just wanted to give her prescription. And of course, you and I are much more on the like, let's get to the root of really what's going on. And I see that so much more now in my practice, just the importance of addressing trauma specifically, because there's, a ton of weight loss, diet, even hormone protocols and all of that. But I don't see as much mainstream addressing the trauma piece, and I find that that's, like, the missing piece. So I love that we're having this conversation, but what do you say some of the biggest misconceptions that you see about even just home birth or, physiological birth, and how can understanding our design actually help women have a more empowering experience? Because I know that for me, that was a huge game changer, and I would love to hear from your perspective, your thoughts on that.
So just again, a little bit of background. Again, I had 3 hospital, 2 home births. The reason I didn't have home births for all of them is because I literally, and this sounds so ignorant, but I literally didn't even know that like that was a thing. Like I had no idea that that was still a thing because I was brought up in the very allopathic model of things where it's like hospitals and medicine is what is the gold standard. And so that's what I did. And so whenever I was looking for a change, because I was like, I cannot go through this, what I went through again, because my third was an induction and it was like all this craziness. I was looking for something different. And thankfully, the chiropractor that I was seeing, he was like, you should just call this midwife and like check her out and see how it is. And I'm like, that's crazy. People don't do that anymore. Like, that's wild. And I knew, like, in my heart that that's what I wanted because I'd been starting to listen to podcasts and like do different things. But at the time, I was like, no, like, that's not possible. And so um, it eventually led to I had a conversation with the midwife and and yeah, I was like, wow, this is so different. She came to our house. She was there for over an hour. I answered all of my questions. And it was like, this is just a completely different model of care. Like the care models are completely different. And so I was really drawn to that because she got to know me. She got to know my fears. And then from there, it led me to do more research on actually what is home birth and what does that look like. Like I thought it was just for like hippies. And I'm like I'm pretty crunchy, but like not super hippie-ish. And I learned that like, no, this is just normal. And we're gonna give birth in the way that we feel safest. And I feel safest at my house. I don't feel comfortable at a hospital. And if I ever need a hospital, like I'm so grateful that they're there and that we have trained surgeons and staff. But like birth is a normal physiological process. And that just means that physiological just means our bodies know what to do if we stay out of the way. It's just like breathing. And you might be like, Brigid, that's crazy. But like, no, there's literally reflexes to push your baby out. And if even if you are asleep, your body would push your baby out. And so the biggest thing is to educate yourself. And so I actually went through, I'm a traditional birth companion, meaning it's essentially like a lay midwife, where that's the biggest piece for me is that education. Because once I learned what physiological birth looks like, it all made sense to like give birth where you feel safest. And again, for me and for most women, it's at home. But we don't see that very often because again, this culture. So last I checked, it was about 2 to 3% of women give birth at home. And I think 3 was at the high end. And so if you look at the stats of home versus hospital births, the rates of twin and breech birth at home is actually significantly better than in a hospital. The rates of transfer are really low compared to some of the rates of other um, like inductions or different procedures or interventions in a hospital. And again, yes, sometimes we need the hospital, but a lot of women don't need that extra like medicalized model. And so I think it's just if you're on the fence of it, like just look into it. Talk to a mom who has given birth at home and to see that it's not this like weird thing. And it's not, and I know one of the big concerns that people have is like it's so bloody and messy. And it's like, it's really not. Like I gave birth at home And then I got a shower and I came back and my bed was like perfectly clean and I got to just lay down in my bed. I don't know what happened to the mess. That's why my husband and like other people were there to help. And so, yeah, I think before discounting it, like really learn about it and then make that informed choice. And then whatever choice you make is yours, but just come from an informed place, not just this place of doing what is quote unquote normal.
I really love obviously talking about the education piece because that's, hugely a passion of mine is just helping people understand that because it was such a game changer for me when I educated myself and just understood more about the body. And in that course that I went through even talked about like the downsides, like statistically, of inductions and how it's like you're really trying to fast forward, which ends up prolonging labor in many, many cases, more often than not. And I had no idea any of that stuff before. And so I also didn't really expect to be having, babies in my mid 40s either. So that was a whole other thing. But I'm curious, how has maybe your faith and obviously the education you've gotten shaped the way that you help women heal?
Yes. So faith is huge because obviously I can't heal anybody. Like that's just not my job. Like I'm not a quote unquote healer like that. I don't buy into that new age thinking. God is the one true healer and he's the only one that can actually do the healing. But he is calling us to step into that healing. And that means that we actually have to do some work. Like, yes, we could potentially lay around and like just say, like, God heal me. Yes, that could work. He can work miracles, he can do whatever he wants. But more often than not, that's probably not going to happen. And I mean, there's a reason why he doesn't allow that to happen like that. And that's because he really wants you to take those steps that are scary, that involve trust, that involve surrender, so that he knows, like, that again, there's that relationship that you're trusting him. And it's so scary, but like, it's so important. And the same is true with birth, where again, it's like, we can't control what's happening. Like, we cannot, just like we can't control anything in life. So we have to just do our best to prepare and then surrender everything up and just know that we're not in control. And so birth and healing are kind of the same, where again, it's like you can go in and try to like white knuckle it, but it's not going to work. Ultimately, it's you have to go in and you just have to surrender every single second. Just surrender, surrender, surrender. And just know that God's going to heal you as long it might not be on your timeline, but eventually he will heal you. And that path is leading towards your sanctification. And that's the most important thing is like that you're doing the hard work so that you can get to heaven and hopefully bring others there as well.
I love that reminder about not being the healer, but just helping people. It's a very uncomfortable process, but it's also very uncomfortable to be stuck healing. I appreciate that. I know somebody is listening right now and they want to know how they can get in touch with you and a little bit more about your programs. If you could tell us about that.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm mostly on Instagram, just at Brigid.Tebaldi. Also online at lorettowellness.com. That's just LORETO wellness.com. You can definitely reach out to me there. I have a birth quiz. It takes just a few minutes. Fill it out, see how your birth is still affecting you. And then from there, I also offer free calls. So if anybody is interested in learning more about my program, Restored by Grace, I'd love to walk you through it. This is not talk therapy. This is like we actually get results that are going to, again, not just heal your birth, but like literally change how you show up in the world. And it's so good. Thanks be to God. I also do have a podcast as well called The Discerning Mother, if anybody wants to listen to that, where we talk all about health and hormones and everything around motherhood. So, yeah, I'd love for you to reach out.
Amazing. And I'll make sure all of that is in the show notes. I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time juggling the babies, both of us today. It's been a really fun conversation.
I think the last thing is to just know that even if you did go through something that was really challenging, like God wants to redeem it. He wants to use it again for your sanctification. So it's just a matter of coming to him, asking for the next steps, But just know that if you ask for those next steps, then he's going to expect that you take a step. And so even though it's scary, like you have to be the one to take that step. Nobody else can take it for you. So if right now you're like, I need to do something different in my life, then again, he has brought you something in your life that needs to change. And now you just have to take that big scary step and to just know that he's going to be with you every second and every step of the way. And then again, it's all for your sanctification and for your good.
Thank you so, so much for sharing your wisdom and love and light. I am so grateful to have you, and hopefully, we can do this again.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks for hanging out with me on this episode of Faith Over Pharma. If something stirred in you today, share this with a friend who's ready to stop outsourcing their health and start healing the way God designed. And if you're ready to stop chasing symptoms and start healing at the root, head over to faithoverpharma.org to grab tools, join the movement, or book a free call. Until next time, keep questioning the narrative, protecting your peace, and walking in the truth that your body was made to heal.